Hello. Hello there. I need to work on my Obi-Wan impersonation, but welcome to another debate video. I don't know why I have these headphones on. Don't really need them. I was listening to music while I was getting this lecture together, and that might be why I did. We've already done the briefing assignment, and I'm going to get those back to you. I changed the perspective of the video because I wanted to have really good sound, and this is how I can access my podcast soundboard. Now that we've done the briefing, or the brief assignment, it's time to start talking about how we would actually debate. So this short lecture is introduction into the way to think about what's required when you're debating. So the first thing I want to talk about is what debating is about. Debating is about relationships. Now that might be something weird you've never heard of before, but let's go over some of these things in detail. What are these relationships? Here we go. It's about a relationship between you and the audience. That's probably the most obvious one. Debate is about persuading audiences. It's not about convincing your opponent of anything. Your opponent's probably not going to change their mind. They're very invested. They're invested enough to participate in a debate with you. The audience is the judge, not your opponent. And that's a big mistake people make, is they try to convince the person opposite them. The interlocutor, I'm not going to say opponent. I think interlocutor is better because sometimes they're not really opposed to what you're presenting. They just more want to modify it. And a lot of times that happens in debates as well. We'll get into that in a later lecture. You and your interlocutor, I just talked about that. It's a relationship between the two of you. What are you trying to use them for? What are you trying to do with their words? What are they trying to do with your words? You're not going to correct them. It's for the audience. The audience is the one who's going to judge and change their mind, the listener. So they're always going to take a position opposite you, or they're going to try to sow doubt about what you're saying or questions about what you're saying. The interlocutor in your perspective. So you're trying to create a relationship there. What's the relationship between them and the perspective you have on the topic? You, the interlocutor, and the motion. So it's you, your interlocutor, the person you're debating with, and the motion itself. What's the relationship between these three things? And then you, the motion, and your perspective. That's more the self-reflective kind of nature. What is it that you and the motion and your perspective have in common? Is it a moment for reflection, or maybe you get some insight by having this triangulated relationship in the terms of the debate? This can go on and on and on ad nauseum. You can play with these relationships all day, but what you'll find is there are a lot more of these than anything else we could talk about debating being about. It's certainly not about winning or being awesome or anything like that. Let's take a look at some of the things debate is not about. It's not about serving the truth or being a diplomat for the truth. This is a big mistake where we think that we discover the truth elsewhere in research that we found, and then we're like serving in the civil service for the truth. We're the diplomat. We're the ambassador for the truth. It's not the case. Debate is such a high temperature activity, it will melt most well-forged things back down into their root elements if it's done well. Debate is a reforging process, so you're not really serving anything. You're trying to forge or fashion the truth in a way, or fashion the right response for this contingent moment that this motion is based on with the perspective you have. If you did that debate a year later, or even sometimes a couple of months later, what you had to offer would not obtain. It wouldn't move the needle at all because the situation had changed so much. So don't think of it as like, I'm going to create this steel armor and wear it and this nothing can penetrate it. It's not the case at all. You can't be a diplomat for the truth. You can't serve the truth in debate. What you can serve is perspective, and above everything else, you serve the audience. Being right, another big mistake about debate. It's not being right. It's about being persuasive and being credible and having a narrative that's invitational and a narrative that the audience wants to be a part of. They can imagine themselves being a part of that narrative. If you are like, I'm right and I don't care who stands against me and I don't care what you think, the audience is not going to feel like much else other than the fact they are compelled or coerced into believing what you have to say or to decide with you. They probably won't even believe you. They'll just be like, well, it seems strong. This is the standard kind of way debate is done, and that's why audiences are like, I don't know, seem pretty strong to me. But they don't feel invested or passionate. They don't take ownership of the side or the perspective that you've taken in the debate. So they can't really participate in it the way you'd like them to as convicted members of the audience. So being right, being persuasive, being having some kind of narrative fidelity, telling a good story, and being communicative is more important than being right. And being honest about your perspective. Instead of saying this is the only view, you could say this is my view and this is why I think this view should be your view. And that's the way to advance in debating, I would say. Owning the libs, owning the right, owning anyone. This isn't about ownership of people. And that kind of thrill is about proving people wrong. But oftentimes what that does is it gets us further away from understanding of the motion, further away from understanding that the controversy that the motion is based on, and further away from the understanding of how people link up information to beliefs about the nature of the world, which is the thing that's going to blow your mind most about debate is you're going to listen to somebody talk and be like, how in the world do they get that belief about things from what they have talked about in the speech? There doesn't seem to be any connection there. It's bizarre. So it's not about owning people, not about proving them wrong. That sick thrill will only come back to haunt you because they'll come back at you with something even more intense to give you kind of a shock, or what we call the politics of astonishment, that like look like, I don't know what to say. People love that. People think that means they won. But what exactly do you win in a democracy if all of your opponents have nothing to say to you? You can't advance your ideas. They can't advance towards your ideas. A stalemate is not, that's good in a zero-sum game. A stalemate or a checkmate is good in a zero-sum game, but unfortunately, this is not a zero-sum game. We can all lose this game of working together in a society or community or a government to figure out what we value and what we should do. We can all lose that game if we're caught up in this kind of gotcha debate mode. Not good. Let's dismiss that. And then the final thing is facts, and the stupid people dismiss them. So a lot of people think honest and straightforward debate is about merely presenting facts. And if people don't understand the facts, then they're just stupid. So time and time and time again, this philosophy of debate just proves how stupid people are. But not me, not my friends on Facebook, not my friends on Twitter. They're the good people. Everybody else is stupid. And everyone's saying this. So it's like, it's the strangest thing. I feel like I'm in multiple overlapping Venn diagram categories of being stupid. I mean, I guess I'm smart to some of my friends, but it's just weird that they would think that's what debate is about. It's like, look, I presented the facts. They didn't want to hear them, so I guess they're just dumb. There's so many dumb people in society. Instead of immediately doing that, which is kind of lazy, why not think about, well, maybe I could articulate my position a bit better than just listing some facts. I could tell a story about who I am, what I stand for, and why I think that these actions or these beliefs are important. Just me. The most important thing about speaking in debate or setting up to do a debate is to realize these two things. One, people side with someone not because they are right, but because they believe in the case the person made. That's much more important, is if they can tell the story and feel that excitement again, that passion that you put into your advocacy, then they are also going to replicate that advocacy when they talk to other people when you're not present. And that's a powerful thing. People want to be a part of a compelling story more than they would want to be right. Think about that. Think about that when you think about politics or something that annoys you or bothers you about the world. Think about that for a minute. A good story is much, much more compelling than the right side of an issue. So as rhetoricians, as people who study debate scholars, we believe we could practice this through debate and try to match up something that most people feel very uncomfortable with, which is a compelling story is not the truth or should have some dissonance with the truth. It's not the case at all. You can create a compelling story about anything, and you have to if you expect people to adopt the point of view that you think is healthy and good for them, for you, and society. You, your interlocutor to the topic. You, your interlocutor to the topic and the perspective and the controversy, and ad nauseum, ad nauseum, ad nauseum. A well-constructed case is the only way one can win a debate. So true. You can't win a debate by pointing out how dumb the other side is. You can't win a debate by pointing out how lacking their evidence is. You can't win a debate by pointing out how bad their speeches were. Obviously, those things can come out and do come out in almost every debate. However, you can't win with those kind of defensive arguments. All you're doing is creating static in the picture that they're presenting. You're creating some fuzz. You're creating some transmission problems. That's not a reason to endorse you, is because you're pointing out problems. All you're saying is, hey, they've got problems with what they put together. They don't have the right evidence. Okay, but why should I endorse you? Oh, because they're bad. But what do you stand for? Well, it doesn't matter. They have a bad case. I mean, no one wants to believe that. Nobody wants to support that. You have to have a story. You have to have a theme. You have to have a thesis, or what we call a case. A good case is not an analysis of specifics about the motion that reveal the correct position on it. Nope, it's a story. A good case is one that shows the audience they already believe in the principles and values their position is based in. The case treats the motion as a conclusion, not a starting point. That's actually a really good point. A lot of times we think of the motion as the boundary or the barrier of the case that we're going to make. Not the case at all. That's a pretty good pun. Not the case at all. Instead, the motion should be a conclusion of the vast and overwhelming amount of values, policies, experiences, and principles that the audience already brings with them to the place where they're going to watch the debate. So the case itself, the motion itself, should be a very small part of what it is that we're arguing. A very small part of the debate. In fact, the best debaters you will ever see, the motion becomes just a natural foregone conclusion. The thing we're supposedly debating, that becomes a foregone conclusion to a large discussion of philosophy, principles, and values, and history, and all these things that the audience would say, yeah, that's who we are. That's what we identify with. Yeah, that's my attitude too towards that. Yeah, that's what I see the motives being in that case. And that's the most powerful thing. Go watch any debate and you'll see the person you side with is somebody who most likely does that. Let's look at a quick example before we get into some more details here. Here's a motion. The U.S. government should forgive all student loans. This is timely. This is being debated right now in Washington. And this debate is one where it's interlocutors, because the Democratic senators and representatives want $50,000 per borrower forgiven. President Biden only wants $10,000 per borrower forgiven. Then there's a second debate going on top of this one about whether or not the president can just do this through executive order, or whether Congress has to pass a bill and make this law. Joe Biden thinks that Congress has to pass a bill and make it law. All the Democrats say, just sign an executive order and let's get this done. So those are two debates you can look into. Now, the traditional way you might debate this before you heard this lecture would be to say, can we afford it? What are the benefits it's going to bring to people? What are the benefits it's going to bring to our economy? And you would structure it out that way. But that's pretty good. But this is going to teach you responsibility. This is going to bankrupt the country. Where are we going to get the money? Are we really ready to go into debt for this? People should have to pay their loans back. Arguments like that. Oh, that's fine. But it doesn't really go deep enough in the way that you would really want it to go to have an incredibly strong debate. Think about it like this. We stand for education, and education should be a government investment. The reason why is because education improves people at such a deep level that the state only benefits from people who've had a higher education. There's no disadvantage to that. Let's look to the world where you have what's popularly known as brain drain around the world, where really smart people will leave their country to go seek education in other countries and then stay there, enriching that country to the disadvantage of their home country. Some governments spend huge amounts of money on their citizens to give them that education with the demand that they return home to apply that education. I think, and we think, that this incredible, important principle of investing in citizens to improve the state is why student loans should be forgiven. Now, you see, I set that up to where the principles and the things involved in it are all prerequisites to this conclusion. The motion's a conclusion, not a question anymore. That's the conclusion of a system of beliefs that we see as global, international, valued by almost every government, even the bad ones. It's an investment in people. We value people. I set it up like that. Likewise, on the opposition side, what could we say? What could we say if we were against this motion? We should say that irresponsibility with money, irresponsibility with paying debts, collapses a nation. It shouldn't even be allowed at the governmental level, yet we permit that, but now we're going to permit it at the individual level. Now we're going to say, if you choose to go to an incredibly expensive college and study something that you're just mildly interested in for fun, that the taxpayers have to pay that? What kind of a message does that send about what the government should invest in or not? This is a bad investment for government because it's frivolous. It doesn't translate to immediate benefit for the country. Things like that. We can go on and on and on. But the clash there that we see between the two sides is on what's the best way to invest in people for the benefit of the country. Now, you don't have to set the debate up that way. You can set it up in lots of different ways, but that's just one example of how to do it, where you say this is a conclusion to a lot of other arguments that I can come up with from various experiences in my life and other things like that, and I can make a pretty good case that way. Okay, next thing you need to know before you actually get into a debate is there are three kinds of motions. Here they are. Forensic, that deals with the past. Epideictic deals with the present. Deliberative deals with the future. These were all identified by Aristotle thousands and thousands of years ago. We still kind of keep this because it's a helpful distinction in helping us understand what it is that we need in order to prove our case correct. So this is the question of proof. What kind of proofs are the most important or the most useful as we move through these different kinds of motions that we might face? Let's deal with forensic motions first because they're first on the slide. So forensic motions. A forensic motion case will establish what happened in a way that makes it meet the status of the claim in the motion. So whatever the claim is about what happened in the past, or what history shows, or what occurred, is going to be backed up by events that meet that definition. Because there will be terms that have to be defined in every debate that you have. There's never going to be a debate that you have where the terms are going to be obvious. You have to go in there and define what is meant by them. We'll see that in the example here in a minute. Forensic cases often have to establish why and how past actions fit or do not fit into various understandings of the key terms of the motion. There could be more than one term. Most motions have more than one term that needs to be kind of settled. So you want to look at that. You want to make sure that you've defined those, but all of your examples should also meet that understanding of it. And although all cases tell a story, forensic motion cases are very heavy on narrative, more heavy than some of the other ones. In order to convince the audience of a perspective to take on a collection of information. So you have all of these facts, all this information about the past. What position should we take on that? Let's look at an example and might make it clearer. Here's a debate we could have in class based on the briefs that you wrote. The two-party system has destroyed the U.S. Constitution. Ooh, I really like it because I hate the two-party system, but that's not really a good reason to like a motion. This is a forensic motion. It's talking about something that's happened and proving it. The two-party system has murdered the Constitution might be another way we could think about it. So this is a very judicial, forensic kind of wording. So how do we approach a motion like this? What kind of things can we do? Well, I need to know what the two-party system is, and I need to know what it means for something to have been destroyed. What does it mean for something to have been destroyed? And we can have a debate about that. We could say, well, destroyed means it's non-functional, or destroyed means it's lost its original intent, but maybe that's a good thing if we're opposition, if we're the other side. We can say, yeah, but the U.S. Constitution supported slavery and all these other things. It's good those elements are gone, and it's because of the party system that these elements were able to be discussed and voted on. So this motion is a typical kind of forensic motion. It's about the past, but has evaluative terms in it, terms that you have to nail down for the audience. Say, here's what we mean. And your thesis, your case would be, if we can prove this to you, we have won the debate. That's very different than what you might think, which is if I rip them to shreds and I completely destroy their foundation, there's just a smoking crater where my opponents stand, I will have won the debate. No, it's not it at all. It's rubbish. It's garbage. That's not how it works. The way it works is you provide something people want to endorse. And regardless of how much attack comes at you, you can still hold together that narrative and make yourselves look attractive and endorsable. You're going to get the audience to support you. You have to create that. You have to create that. So let's look at some questions here for this forensic motion. What does destroyed mean? How would we know something or someone was guilty of destroying something? So you set up the criteria for how it would be judged. Here's what we think are three things that would mean something is destroyed and that something was responsible for it. That you can just make that up. You can do that. You can also go look it up and find out what the criteria for destruction are in something that is a relevant field. But for this case, it's kind of a common parlance, kind of public motion that everyday citizens can weigh in on. It's not a hyper-specific expertise legal motion. You could take a legal definition of destruction if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. Finally, what actions or inactions would lead to something being destroyed? And that's where you would start to construct what it is you're going to say. How would we know the Constitution has been destroyed? Well, let's look at what the Constitution is meant to do. Separate powers between the Senate, House of Representatives, the President. Well, if all three are the same party, there's no separation of powers. Things go through very smoothly and quickly. And that's not very good for a limited government with limited power that's meant to forward citizen desires and democracy and protect minority rights. That's not good. What's another thing? And you could just go on like that. And that would prove that it's been destroyed. Or whatever the topic might be. These are the kind of questions you might want to ask. Okay, let's move to the next one. Epideictic. Epideictic motions deal with present events. Epideictic debates center around what we could praise or blame for our current situation as individuals, society, or some other group like a country. It doesn't really matter the group. So, for example, if we wanted to talk about the university, we'd be like, St. John's is too expensive because they have too many tenured professors who don't care about teaching. Great. Okay. Now that's a epideictic debate. So we would have to say this is the issue that is at blame for creating the value situation that we're in now, the struggle situation that we're in now. These debates require detailed explanations as to why something should be praised in line with community values or blamed disruptive to their values. It requires a number of examples that will communicate to the audience why your set of values is the one most germane to the topic and to the community. So what you're talking about is whether or not something has interrupted the normal values and the normal perspective and principles of a group or community. Let's look at an example. Social media is to blame for the loss of civility and political discourse in the United States. Great topic. This would be a fun debate to have. I think it would be a great topic to have. We could do this one and have a lot of fun. But in order for it to be really good, we have to think about what does it mean? How do we know that civility is being lost? Why is civility important? This is different than forensic because it's not saying like social media caused the loss of civility or we have lost civility because of social media, which would be a different proof, a different way of talking. This one is the existence of social media is actively disrupting a value that we have. That is to blame for the why we can't do something that we used to be able to easily do, which is the way people tend to talk about civility. Might not be the case. We might have always had some trouble with it on the DL. You want to know what political discourse is and what social media is, and then from there you can kind of construct and say, social media is disrupting our civility because social media does not have the same kind of values that political civility would have or that a discursive fidelity or fidelity to dialogue would have or would entreat. That's that example. Let's look to some questions. Why does civility matter? Why is it important? What does it do for us? How does it support our most important values like democracy or voting or being a good citizen or having open debate and dialogue about important issues or critical controversies? How does social media interact with notions of civility? Is this social media in general, or how do people use it? That would be the stasis of quality. If you haven't watched the stasis lecture yet, go watch that. That'll help you a lot in forming the kinds of arguments and the kinds of ideas that you would want for what you're going to say in a debate. And what values of our society or community are wrapped up in social media use? That's great. Like, where does it overlap? That's kind of a cool question. Where does it overlap with values that we hold dear? Because on the other side, they might say social media is an extension of our most important values. It's not disruptive at all to civility. Civility is breaking down for all kinds of other reasons. We should be happy with social media and not blame it for this. That's the way those motions would go. A lot of times epideictic topics tend to posit a couple of values against each other in a more direct way. And you might see that as we get into the debates, or the topics you might have written would impose that kind of value. Like oftentimes there are things like liberty versus security or freedom versus the collective well-being, individuals versus the obligation of the government to protect them from bad choices, things like that. All right, last one. Deliberative motions are about the future. Deliberative motions are about an action or a set of actions that should be done. These debates focus on the articulation of a problem or a set of problems that are acute or more acute than other sets. That's the interesting thing about deliberative is when you look at the world, there's tons of problems. What we do in a deliberative debate is to say, this motion is about this problem. So I would spend a lot of my case articulating that problem and why that problem is so dire, so acute, or so horrible that it warrants our attention. So we move our attention away from the other problems that might be in the world, and we concentrate on that problem or set of problems directly. and we say this is the one that has to be addressed. We create a sense of urgency or a sense of acute pain or terror or horror for a massive amount of people or for one particular group of people. You can do it in a lot of different ways. These problems require a set of actions to address that will reduce them significantly or be worth the cost of the actions. That means that anything we do to address this problem can't be worse than the problem itself. It can't be, and worse can mean a lot of different things. For some people, it means more expensive than just letting the problem fester. Some people feel like that's a miscarriage of justice, that if people are suffering or being harmed, it doesn't matter how much it costs to fix it because nobody needs to be in pain or suffering. So this goes back and forth a bit, but the general idea is that a deliberative case would say, these actions that we're going to take are better than the set of problems that exist now in the status quo or the present system. Often there are discussions of the advantages of taking a set of actions over another. This is where we are with the student loan issue, is there's no disagreement that this problem is serious. There is disagreement about what the degree of action should be, $10,000 or $50,000. But nobody involved in the debate is saying don't do it at all. That would be people outside of that debate on the larger debate between the more conservative party or the conservatives or the right-wing parties versus the Democrats and the left-wing parties saying loan forgiveness is absolutely bad and you shouldn't do it at all, but they're not involved in the current Democratic argument that's going on inside the party. They're not involved in that one. Let's look at an example. The U.S. Supreme Court should have term limits. I think this is a great debate, and it's one that comes up from time to time. When we think about the Supreme Court, we wonder about the lifetime appointments. You've read the Federalist Papers. You know why they're appointed for a lifetime. You know why they have lifetime appointments, and you might not find that argument compelling. So maybe there are other reasons they should have lifetime appointments, but without that in mind, it seems like term limits might be a good idea, considering all the changes that have happened in the world since then. But even saying that, it doesn't address it the way it ought to be addressed, which is, what is the problem or set of problems that the lack of term limits is creating? How acute are those problems? How serious are they? Do they need to be addressed immediately? And the answer to that has to be yes. You have to structure a very good story about why those issues are so important, so vital, and why it has to be fixed rather quickly. Questions to ask for this one. Questions for deliberative motions. What problems do we face in the current Supreme Court system? How damaging are they? How acute is this issue? Why would a term limit solve them? How? That's a really good question. Like, why term limits? Why not something else? Why not elections? Somebody might say that. He would say, oh, well, the term limit's the best solution. So we get into the discussion of advantages to a particular case. What advantages would a term limit have over other methods? And so these are the questions you would want to think of hearing this motion to be able to present your case regardless of what side you're on. I know most of these questions sound like they're for the pro side or what we call the affirmative side. But they're questions that you want to ask on either side to make your case. Term limits are a bigger problem than anything we face in the Supreme Court system now. Term limits are more damaging than any of the problems that the affirmative listed. It's not an acute issue at all. It wouldn't solve. It would just create more. That's usually how these things go. A lot of times the arguments in a deliberative debate are about creating a myriad more problems that are more dire and more devastating than any chance of fixing them that the affirmative idea could muster. Well, I think I had a couple more things to say there, but I think that for now, I think that we can stop there and just talk about and think about those three kinds of motions and what your responsibilities are in there. We can go into more detail on each one if you'd like. I can do a video on just one kind, but forensic, epideictic, deliberative. Past, the present, and the future. Those are the kind of motions that we get, and they all require a particular kind of approach in order to make the debate work. But remember, the most important thing is debates for the audience. It's about conveying a relationship between three or more terms on the stage in the debate for the people who are listening to it. And when you start thinking about debate that way, you're going to find that you're able to win and move the value of the debate to this whole other level besides I'm right, you're wrong, you're stupid, I have the facts, which is what most people think debate is today, unfortunately. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Put them on the Discord, put them in the comments here, and I will address them.